Hello, everyone. Welcome to Grad Connections 3-weekly Industry Insights webinar. My name's James. If you haven't met me before, I'm the Client Services Director at Grad Connection up here in Sydney. Joined today by Heidi and Abi, who I'll introduce shortly. They're both down in Melbourne. We'll just give everyone a chance to jump in and be here. Nice to see some regular faces. Or not faces, regular names on the list. Hopefully you'll want to do some talking today too, and we'll get to see some faces as well. So just give people a few more minutes to arrive. Apologies, my Labrador has just decided to start a coughing fit in the background. So just give people a few more minutes to arrive, then we'll do our usual introductions and housekeeping. Okay. We'll kick off in the interest of punctuality, and who else gets here, gets here. So welcome again. My name's James, the Client Services Director at Grad Connection. I'd like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land on which we meet, work and live today, and pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging, celebrating the diversity of Aboriginal peoples and their ongoing cultures and connections to the lands and waters of this place that we now call Australia. I'd like to acknowledge that I'm hosting and recording this webinar from the lands of the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation as the traditional custodians of this place we now call Sydney. Welcome again. So just some housekeeping for today. As usual, this isn't TV. We hope that people will participate. So please feel free to use the chat box and the Q&A as we go through. I'll be posting up some links and things to what's going on in there. I might start, as more people are arriving, I might start with some useful messaging, I hope. So I will share a link for everyone to join next year's series of Industry Insights webinars. They're starting again on January the 13th. And once again, we'll be at 12 o'clock on a Wednesday, Sydney time, every 3 weeks. We do have some content already in the diary. So first up, we'll be revealing the results of our diversity and inclusion surveys and releasing the white paper on January the 13th. And then I think it's February the 3rd is going to be the next one. And February the 3rd, we'll be joined by Joanne Baldwin from Kite Union Migration to help us navigate through the world of employing international students and visas, which I know is a hot topic for many of you looking to access new pools of talent. So I'm sure Joanne on the 3rd of Feb is going to be a really interesting discussion and hopefully open up some new audiences for people in time for peak season. So do get registered for next year's series. We will not be automatically registering people for the series in the interests of being nice to data. So today I'm joined by Heidi Holmes, who is one of the founders of Mentorloop. I will hand over to Heidi in a moment to introduce Mentorloop. I'm also joined by Abi Scott, who's the Managing Director of SOVA Assessment. Thank you, Abi, for your sponsorship of Top 100 in conjunction with the AFR. I know we're about to kick off that kind of process, I think, with the virtual assessment centres.
That's right. Yep, assessment centres coming soon, which I anticipate will likely be virtual again. And candidates have already gone through the psychometric assessment. So the process is underway.
Yeah, wonderful. So in the latter part of today's session, Abi will be sharing a little bit more about what she's undergone this year, as pretty much every client has wanted to flick to virtual, and how she has managed that with her team. Which is going to be super interesting. But first up today, I'm going to be talking to Heidi Holmes. As I said before, Heidi's one of the founders of Mentorloop. The reason for bringing Heidi into the conversation is that our next working group, which we're going to kick off in January, is going to be all about mentoring our student users on the Grad Connection platform. It's an idea that kind of came about after a few conversations with employers and some of our student focus groups earlier on this year. And the purpose of today's session with Heidi is to kind of give us some background on Mentorloop and kind of explain how it works. But we would love to be kicking off a pilot, having done some groundwork in January, February and March, kicking off a pilot in April that involves student and graduate job seekers who are using the Grad Connection website, recent graduates who are in employment, driven by client introductions, and Grad Connection alumni, if you like, so people who have found a job using the site, and then another group of mature employees within our client organizations who might want to be mentors or indeed mentees in a pilot program. So really looking at kind of creating a deeper level of support driven by users of the site and people within our client organizations. I'm excited by what that might look like. We're going to keep the pilot quite small. We might talk a little bit more about that, but I'll hand over to Heidi, who I know has a couple of slides to kind of introduce Mentorloop. Heidi, welcome.
Thank you, James. And hello, everyone. Yeah, so what I thought might be useful for you all to hear a little bit more today about is, I guess, why Mentorloop exists and really how we see mentoring a little differently. And I think, as everyone's sort of referencing this year, how things have changed given 2020 as well, and where mentoring fits into the landscape going forward. So, I'm here to sort of hopefully challenge some of your current perceptions around what mentoring is, who it applies to, get you thinking a little bit differently about what mentoring is and how it's actually even more relevant and more important than ever before. And then I'll just briefly chat to what we're doing to help facilitate a new way of mentoring as well. And then happy to jump into some Q&A. So I'll start sharing my screen, and I'll keep this as sort of snappy as I can, because I always feel like getting to the Q&A is where the value is for people. So this first slide that I have, my co-founder loves using this photo because I have a double chin in it and she doesn't. So yeah, we actually went to school together, and we are the co-founders of Mentorloop. And the reason we came together to start this business was really that we came to this challenge of trying to find and connect a mentor from, kind of different places. At time, I was running another startup. I was the sole founder, and I was looking sort of for guidance, from somebody that had been there and done that and run their own business. But it was sort of like, how do you navigate that world? And Luce was returning from London after a few years over there, and again was looking to connect back into her community. And how do you do that? How do you go and find your tribe, or how do you connect with that future version of yourself? And so it got us thinking that it wasn't an easy thing to do if you didn't have access to these networks. And that's where, we take it back to what we believe is that, often people have a very sort of a certain idea of what mentoring is and who it applies to, and that we sort of refer to this concept of the chosen one. And I think how we've traditionally seen mentoring play out in an organizational context is actually that it's something reserved for the high potentials. You're sort of tapped on the shoulder and invited in, and, we'll make these connections sort of happen for you. And that's fine for that, small group of people. But I think, we're all aware that, leaders often reference their mentors as being important in helping them progress their careers. And I think, we're in that that age now as well, particularly with younger generations coming through, that there's this awareness of, building your networks and actually, looking for guidance and support from other people in kind of that way to actually facilitate continuous learning as well. So we strongly believe at Mentorloop that the right connection can change a life, and we want to make more of these connections available. So it's really around how do we make mentoring more accessible, and we believe that if you start making mentoring more accessible and you open up I guess, the opportunities to more people, that's where you can actually, get more creative connections happening, or what we refer to is you can actually facilitate more of these unlikely matches. And that's where some of the mentoring gold is, rather than, in some of those traditional hierarchical type relationships. And what we are trying to challenge people to think about is, yes, that's fine, that has its place, but it's also about educating people on, the different types of mentors that are, that, or mentoring relationships that can play out. So we talk about building your own personal advisory board, and it may be that, it does make sense to kind of connect with someone that is kind of keeping you accountable to this longer term goal around, this, maybe you've got a goal around getting a promotion in 12 months time or 2 years time. But also during that, there's going to be points that you may be looking for guidance around how to just navigate something very specifically. So we talk about, having this pool of experts that you can tap into, and that we don't necessarily just have to think about mentoring as being someone that, you connect with for an hour each month, and it needs to be this 12-month commitment. Mentoring needs to be much more flexible. It needs to be much more dynamic, and it needs to be much more real time. So what we're also sort of encourage organizations to think about is moving from this, a mentor program starts at this date and we're only allowing people to find a match for this period of time. But how do we shift people to thinking about having an always on kind of organic approach to mentoring as well? And so again, coming back to, I guess, some of these perceptions, while we're thinking about building out that personal advisory board, while some of these relationships still tend to be a little bit hierarchical, we always think the best mentoring relationships are reciprocal in nature. And so it is about, I guess, educating people when they're coming to the table and reminding them this is an opportunity that even if you're a mentee, we all have something to learn, but we all have something to give as well. And I guess that's what we really lean into at Mentorloop as well, like making sure the mentor is coming to the table open to learning, because there's great insights that can be coming from the next generation, particularly if we're thinking about, new professionals, grads and students. They are the future. They've got, they've been doing things, they've got access to and know how to use technology that some of us don't. There's insights there, but there's also insights around, just different demographic insights, or what's the challenges facing them. There's great learnings to be had from being a mentor, and I definitely in my work play the role as both mentee and mentor, and find both roles really rewarding. And so I think, it's also important to come back to this theme that we talk about, and is accessibility. And I think particularly when we're thinking about this cohort of people, that they don't necessarily at this stage of their careers have access to these networks. And it doesn't necessarily, particularly if we're thinking about international students, it's not necessarily something they know about or it comes naturally to. And so mentoring then can present as a very daunting kind of proposition to some people. And so that's again why it is, I guess we need to, challenge that perception around, people thinking, mentoring something that you should go and do yourself. I didn't find it hard to find a mentor. I just rang up Bill and, off we went. That our own lens that we apply in terms of how we've accessed mentoring, or how mentoring's played out for us, that isn't necessarily, I guess other people don't necessarily have access to the same natural networks or know how to facilitate it. And so that's where it's not just about launching a mentor program and, we say build it and they will come. There's also this piece around educating people on why it's relevant, and how we can make it less of a, I guess, daunting experience for people to opt in, is really important. And we always talk about this, this is the new superpower. Like, asking for help is actually a really hard thing to do. We also, as founders have to, particularly this year, I think we've all just felt like we've had to soldier on and push through and, make it to the other side. But actually pausing and thinking about who you can within your networks, ask for help. This is a superpower, because we often forget to do this. And it can just be one or two conversations that you have with someone that can really help, either I guess consolidate what you're thinking and where you want to go, or potentially even open your eyes up to something else you haven't considered. And so bringing this all together, the why of mentoring and where it's going and why we exist, we really exist to make mentoring more accessible for more people. But how we do that is not, I guess, through a consumer lens. It's through organizations. So our platform, we work with corporates, government, non-for-profits, community groups, and it's really around how can we help them activate their communities, which may be internal to their business, or to the example that James spoke to at the start in terms of grad connection, connecting people across different communities and networks as well. But it's really around, bringing to the forefront, why mentoring is relevant, and then through the platform, onboarding people to help them identify skills, goals they're looking to achieve. We use that data to then inform matches. So we're getting quality, equitable matches based around outcomes people are looking to achieve, and then providing pathways. So education and resources is again sort of a key differentiator of our platform. Like, it's not about telling mentoring people this is how mentoring has to happen. It's giving them some guardrails in which to operate. And then, what we're really passionate about and what we love is, I guess, the insights and tracking success. And this isn't just about how many times people chatted or how many goals they did, but collecting user stories of the real human impact that mentoring's had, in that it may have helped them navigate a different career path. It may have helped them to have the courage to even come out at work. We work with some programs in the LGBTQI space. So there's some really, we're really like to get at the heart of what the impact has been from some of these relationships as well. So yeah, as I said, working across multiple organizations. We're a global software company, working with some great organizations. Thanks, James.
Brilliant. Thank you, Heidi. That was great, really informative. And I'll share, I actually came across Mentorloop with one of your LGBTIQ community programs, the Out for Australia program. And I forget which law firm was responsible for kind of instigating that, or is...
Yes, I know. And now it's
Sorry to put you on the spot.
It's the big one. It's the big one. They're actually our lawyers too. It'll come to me. Me.
But I discovered that through one of the community magazines, and just literally saw an ad and dived into the program. And then that's where the kind of thought came from.
Yeah.
Sort of, we could do this for Grad Connection users and employees within our client organizations really powerfully, I think. But one of the things that really stood out for me about that program, and I was wondering if you could share a little bit more about it, was the kind of multi-directional, and you touched on it at the beginning, that kind of hierarchical idea that we need to be mentored by somebody who is kind of, I guess, older and wiser than us. And one of the things that I loved about the Out for Australia model was I could kind of look for somebody who was an expert in something that wouldn't necessarily, I would have thought of as a mentor, and how that kind of works, and some examples of that would be great.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, it's just that we think we've got to connect with somebody who's 20 years ahead of us. And I actually always say, it's probably the worst person you can connect with sometimes. Like, we always talk about, personally as startup founders, like the best mentors we've had are just other founders that are 6 or 12 months ahead of us, because they can help you see around corners and kind of almost tell you what's going to happen next. That sort of insight is highly relevant, highly useful, and what you feel and see is the impact of that. And so that kind of makes you want to invest more into this experience. And I think that, I started my career, as a grad at, KPMG. And I remember this experience of, having a conversation with the partner where he sort of lectured us about, if we stayed here for the next 10, 15 years, we could be one day in a position like him. And I was just thinking, that's the least of my worries right now. Like, I just need to know, like, how do I make sure that I put my best foot forward in the next 6 months? How do I maybe get a transition over here? I'm not thinking about becoming a partner. God, I just need to know where to get a good coffee and like what to do next, kind of thing. And so again, it's not that those relationships aren't useful. I just think when we hear of mentoring or hierarchical mentoring, that really conjures up that that kind of, very senior leader and junior coming together. And I think the other issue with thinking about mentoring like that is it's just not accessible or scalable. There's only so many people at the top, but if we think about if everyone can play the role of mentee and a mentor, mentoring becomes much more of a scalable opportunity, and there becomes much more of an opportunity for people to find the right connection. So yeah, and I think that it presents as a less daunting sort of proposition to people too, if you're just thinking about connecting with someone that's 12 months ahead of you, or even at the same level, but they just have this expertise that you don't. It's a much more palatable proposition, I believe.
Yeah, and I can share, like, in the last few weeks, I have identified somebody at Seek who I would love to be my mentor, who is more mature, different stage in their career. And I am so nervous about asking them to be, it's so weird. Like, I know that it's such a good thing for me to do, but and I speak to her probably once a fortnight, but I haven't found the way to say, will you please be my mentor yet? And
and it's an awkward thing to say. Like,
so
it's like
awkward.
it almost feels like you're asking, someone out on a date.
It does.
It feels awkward. And like we talk about, like, mentoring relationships can happen in a lot of different ways. Sometimes it's just you have this connection, and it could start from just a couple of coffees, and then all of a sudden it just sort of rolls into this regular thing, and you don't even mention the word mentoring. Through to other people thinking about, like, sort of cold outreach and just asking someone to be their mentor, and that's not necessarily the right way to go about it as well. But I think that's where a program can put some structure around it, and help make that outreach easier for people, because what you've got within a platform like Mentorloop or an internal program or a sponsored program is you've got a hand signal. You've got a hand signal from people saying, I'm willing to be a mentor, please reach out to me. And that's sometimes that's missing out there in the big bad wide world. But I think in your situation, if you've already had these interactions, then it is about what I always find really hard to say no to when people might approach me to be a mentor, is if they talk about something I've said and how it's helped them and how they want to take that forward. You can't say no to that. You're like, oh, I said something that was of value, and they've gone and done something with it, and like, yeah.
No, but I think it's that, as you say, that hand signal from people who are willing to do it, at scale, makes it kind of so much easier to kind of create the connections faster. What else have you learned, and since built into the technology over the last few years, that I guess give you the kind of foundations for a good program?
Yeah, I think like from an organizational level, it's thinking about mentoring longer term. So it's about starting small, maybe with a pilot, and then building from there around your ambitions. But I think just in general, there's often a very kind of short-term view, and we need results instantly, and you're not going to get that with mentoring. And so we still understand that in this world, people need to see some kind of progress, momentum. And so that's for us where we've really focused, like, yes, mentoring is proven to have an impact on retention and engagement, but they are really long goals that a lot of different people and initiatives are fitting into. So what we've focused on is how can we retell the real human impact that mentoring is having. And so there's ways that you can do that even a month into a program, and that's through little mini pulse surveys that we run through the platform around understanding how satisfied people are in their mentoring relationship, and giving people the opportunity to share their stories back. And so that's what we talk about, user stories being really powerful in giving some immediate kind of reassurance to the organization that this is working and this is having an impact, but also that's great collateral to then go and disseminate to the rest of your community, because we always talk about you can't be what you can't see. And these user stories then really help with that momentum of getting the next cohort excited about joining the program as well. So I think, with a lot of HR tech or initiatives, there's often this focus on quantitative data, which absolutely, I get that, it's got to have an impact to the bottom line. But I think what a nice sort of other side of the coin, mentoring brings these beautiful qualitative kind of points of reference, which I think particularly after this year, is more important than ever, because next year I think the themes around well-being, connectedness, support are going to be really hot topics that leaders are going to have to deal with. And I think that's where, that qualitative piece of measurement really, really is quite powerful.
Yeah, it's interesting. Just on that, I was having dinner with a very seasoned sales leader a couple of days ago, who said that this year is the first time in his 30 years of leading sales teams that he's actually asked the question, "How are you?" to his team, and been genuinely interested in the answer, and because he's had to be. And it's, he said he'd grown so much because of what has happened this year, and his capacity to coach had grown so much.
Yeah, and I think empathy, is something that, or emotional intelligence, it kind of got thrown around with, over the last decade. But actually, empathy, is something that is really on display in a mentoring relationship, particularly from a mentor, because you're forced to listen. That's your job. Listening's really hard. And I think this year there's been a lot of noise. There's just been a lot of shouting. And so, from taking on the role as mentor, that's a really grounding exercise to revisit some of those things that you need to remind yourself to do as well. And I think that's what we see through this qualitative kind of feedback we get as well, the impact it has on mentors in kind of reminding them of the things they need to be doing, and the advice, eating your own dog food kind of thing, the advice you're giving, you kind of sit back and think, oh shit, I need to actually go and do that too.
Yeah. No, for sure. And from personal experience, I've found being a mentor, it has you raise your game
Yeah.
in a way that you weren't expecting.
Yeah.
It's like kind of, you have to be in integrity to be a great mentor.
Yeah.
So I might open this up to some others. Really keen to hear from anyone with any experiences of running mentoring programs in their organizations, or people who've had experiences of being a mentor or mentee. Happy to open it up to some chat, or I can share a little bit more about the thoughts that we've had on this pilot program that we've got planned for next year, because I am keen. It's probably 4 or 5 employers that we're looking for to kind of getting involved in the pilot. And I guess, over a couple of planning meetings in sort of January and February, flesh out what that looks like. But we're sort of envisaging 4 or 5 employers getting involved, and making the opportunity to be a mentor or mentee available to their employees, and I guess kind of sponsoring the program initially. And then we'll open it up on a first come, first served basis to a relevant cohort of students on the Grad Connection site, really based on the kind of study disciplines and industries of the employers that put their hands up to be in the pilot, so we can get some sort of immediate stickiness, I think. And that's where we're at, I guess, in terms of thinking. We're kind of looking for the volunteers to get that project off the ground. I'm just looking if anybody would like to raise your hand if you've got something to contribute today, and we can have you come over. No takers. Should we try raise your hand if you think the mentoring pilot program is a good idea? Yay! The hands are going up. We're on the right track. We've clearly answered every question possible on mentoring programs. That's all right. So awesome. Thank you so much, Heidi, for coming. Is there anything else you'd like to add, I guess?
No. I just hope, to hopefully left people with thinking a little bit differently about mentoring, and challenge you all to think about how it might be useful within either individually next year or within the networks in which you operate.
No, thank you so much, and we will be following up. I guess, again, it's first come, first served with our employers. So I'll make sure that. How long will the pilot last? How many students are we looking to put through the pilot? Great. Sorry, I missed those down the bottom. Too much technology open at the same time. How many students? So we're probably looking for around about the sort of 150 to 250 participants in the program. So kind of, I guess, a 50-50 split if we were talking a kind of traditional model. But yeah, around about, is that right, Heidi?
Yeah,
We
we've sort of put out there like a good pilot sort of starting base is anywhere from sort of 100 to 200 participants, and then you've got some flexibility of how that split might look, because you might have mentors that are willing to have more than one mentee. You might have some people being both, particularly if you're looking at sort of that peer-to-peer mentoring happening as well. So yeah, not sort of necessarily thinking about it as 100 mentees, 100 mentors, but more like 100 to 200 participants.
Yeah, wonderful. How long will the program last? I think we're initially certainly looking at a 6-month period to kind of get enough people and velocity going with the program.
Yeah, that's definitely sort of the minimum time you need to get some momentum and obviously get some of those data points as well. And then that pause then enables us to sort of look at what's worked well, what could we refine going forward, and then almost like relaunching the program after that 6-month period.
Yeah, great. And I'm not sure I understand this one from Philippa. Forgive my.
I think it's sort of talking about maybe for the students if there's a screening process, I'm guessing. So I guess I'm not sure. I guess it would be Grade Connections call. I guess somehow it can practically play out in the platform is that we can kind of run an EOI, so people can sign up and then you can kind of approve them to come into the program. The other option is just on a first come, first served basis as well. So we've got 100 seats for students and doing it that way.
Yeah, I hope that helps with that one, Philippa. I mean, I see it being as inclusive as possible to complete testing. I wouldn't have envisaged any testing per se to be a part of the pilot. I think it probably makes sense to, and correct me if I'm wrong here, Heidi, but once we have our kind of volunteer employers committed, it would make sense to go out to students studying in disciplines that that employer group would generally be recruiting from, just so there's some initial synergies kind of built into the possibility.
Yeah, absolutely. I think having some clear outcomes for a pilot really makes sense. And, there's got to be a kind of a broader, objective that you're working towards as well. And that really helps in structuring a good program then if you've got kind of some organizational KPIs. And then I saw the question about some form of participation award certification. Yes, so both mentees and mentors, as they complete sort of these milestones through Mentorloop, the final milestone is actually an accreditation badge that you get as a mentee or mentor, which will then integrate with your LinkedIn profile and display a little completed, a mentoring relationship and I guess because we have education and resources, it's kind of acknowledged as just as a badge within Mentorloop. So within LinkedIn, you can have that then displayed on your profile.
Awesome. Some disadvantage. Yeah. So Philippa, I mean, I really see this as being a program, targeting everybody that wants to participate. If they've got something that they feel that they can add to somebody's life as a mentor, and if they've got something that they would, they're open to be mentored about, that's really the only kind of qualification I've seen as kind of happening. I mean, maybe how does is there any experience you can talk to, Heidi, of kind of the platform really delivering for disadvantaged groups, or perhaps
Yeah,
those
I mean,
with
there's
disabilities?
some ability to sort of customize the sign up piece. So if you did want to collect some data points to ensure that you were getting a diverse, I guess, representation across students. So, international students you wanted to reserve 20 spots for, or students from this kind of discipline, etc. So you can tweak the sign up form to ensure that you're getting the data points, so you can kind of at a program level then make sure that you've got that D&I lens kind of applied as well. So yeah, absolutely. What we've learned, no one mentor program's the same, and that's where there's some flexibility to kind of be able to make sure you get the outcome you're looking for the program.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you. But I think, to end on, it is very much to be designed by the employers who are volunteering kind of their time and their people into it, so that we get something, a model that everybody buys into. Heidi, thank you so much for participating today. Look forward to seeing more of you as we progress through the pilot. I hope you can hang around.
Yes, I will.
We'll get up to more questions at the end.
Great. Thanks so much, James.
Thank you. Abby, you're back.
I am. I had to switch on my heater, even though it's 27 degrees down here in Melbourne at the moment. My office is really cold.
Oh, all righty. So, Abby, said before, you're the MD of SOVA Assessment in Australia, and we are privileged to have you as a top 100 sponsor supporting us with that initiative, all gearing up to the main event in February. And I think we are almost at the point where we'll have the top 100 list and start being communicated to people in the very near future. I'm reliably informed. But I shall hand over to you to talk about assessments. And
yeah,
over. Cheers.
Perfect. Thank you for that, James. And yeah, as James mentioned, at SOVA, we're a top 100 sponsor for the psychometric assessment component of the recruitment process. And I think it's such a fantastic initiative, and let's hope that we have the actual party this year in person come February, but we'll see. So just to introduce SOVA, we are a talent technology provider, and I'll just share my screen just to help explain some of this. So essentially, we have an online assessment platform which covers the end-to-end assessment. So from psychometric types of assessments, video interview, virtual assessment centres, which have been quite popular this year given the pandemic and the situations that we found ourselves in, and also merging that with information and data and reports for onboarding and development purposes as well. So in the platform itself, a large part of our ethos is really around creating a realistic job preview, and also making sure that we're combining both the science and technology. So making sure that we're putting in place assessment solutions that are accurate and fair, and then really leveraging the flexibility of technology. So given the environment that we're in at the moment, very excited in Melbourne to be coming out of our lockdown and possibly seeing some people in person. But for a large portion of this year, we've been conducting virtual assessment centres. So in the graduate recruitment space, and looking back to my calendar, it was back on the 10th of March this year when we started speaking to clients who were feeling a little bit panicky, realizing that border restrictions were coming into place around different countries in the world, and thinking, we've got assessment centres that are due to be in person, we've got teams of people who are due to travel, we've got candidates who are due to travel. What on earth are we going to do? So that's when we pulled together our team of both psychologists and our technology experts as well, to really start thinking this through and figuring it out. So as I say, 10th of March was when we first started, talking to candidates and scoping what on earth we were going to do in this virtual world. And then 20th of March, 10 days later, is when we had our first pilot for a virtual assessment centre. So things have moved quite quickly this year. I think industry-wise, it's been really exciting to see the changes that we've had to make. And I thought it might be useful today just to share some of those experiences, some of those considerations for virtual assessment centres, and what we're hearing from the market now, be it about 9 months on from the first initial panic. So in terms of the virtual assessment centres, we had clients in the market who'd been running assessment centres in person. Some of them had been using our technology to support that, so to support scheduling, data collation from assessors, and also to provide materials to candidates. So what we did quite quickly was integrate that technology with the likes of a Zoom and an MS Teams to get that video conferencing facility in place. Now, in terms of, I think, the experience, we really saw that there were 3 main stakeholders in the assessment centre process. Let's go first and foremost, the candidate. So really working through, what does candidate care look like now in a virtual world? How can we make sure that it's, the whole process is virtual but not distant, and really making sure that it's still human? How can we allow candidates to engage in the organisation's brand and with their brand? Because they're not going to be there in person. They're not going to be having the office tours. They're not going to be meeting assessors in person. So how can we use technology to really sort of leverage that? Apologies. And also, how are candidates going to perceive the experience? Is it going to feel fair? How might candidates behave in the virtual world? Secondly, from the assessor side of things, thinking through, the assessment centre is a really rigorous part of the recruitment process. We spoke to a number of clients who were sort of saying, oh, well, we might just use psychometrics more at that stage in the process. We can't run assessment centres virtually. Let's stick with video interview and psychometrics. And my take on that and the conversations that we were having there was a case of psychometrics are great. I'm definitely a huge fan of psychometrics, but if they were okay just to use in the process in general, why did you have an assessment centre in the first place? So don't lose that, the rigor of that process that you probably spent quite a lot of time and energy to put in place and to develop. So how can we put that online, making sure that it's fair? What are the considerations for assessors? What does candidate behaviour look like against the competencies when it's virtual? So we had to really go back to clients and work with them to review their competency framework, the behavioural indicators that they're assessing at a virtual assessment centre, to see, that behaviour that you might see face-to-face, is it the same or is it different online when you've only got, somebody's head and shoulders in view? Also from the assessor side of things, training was a huge part. We had experiences where we had candidates in their homes, sometimes with children or siblings around. There was one case when a child in the background fell off a chair mid-assessment centre activity for a candidate. There was somebody's mum who was putting the washing out in the background. So really, and getting assessors to understand, these candidates cannot control where they are. They can't control their external environment. That's not what you're assessing. So really carefully briefing assessors on that, around different biases that can come into play. Interestingly, what we saw this year with candidates as well, and what we heard, was some really beautiful stories around somebody who hadn't had to buy a suit So it's, that was a big deal for this candidate. Somebody who hadn't had to pay for their own travel. So we've definitely seen an increase, I think, in social mobility, which I think will, become and remain increasingly important over the coming years. And then finally, for the facilitator, so possibly for a lot of the people on this call here today, how on earth do you run an assessment centre virtually where you're not there to grab people and move them around? You're not there to take people's paper notes from them and to actually see and be able to record all of that data. So from the facilitator side of things, really thinking around how the technology can support organisation of the assessment centre, both in terms of scheduling that data collation piece and facilitating candidate feedback as well. James, I thought it might be useful for the group just to show some of the technology that we've put into place, just to sort of bring all of this to life a little bit more and really focusing on that candidate, assessor and facilitator experience.
No, that would be really good. Yeah, Abby, I'm really thinking here, kind of, was it easy to kind of pick up tasks and assignments that would have been delivered in a physical world and kind of put them into the virtual world, or was it new content that needed to be created?
Yeah, it was tweaks. It was tweaks to content. There was certainly, no, for our clients with their frameworks, no major shifts.
Right.
For a lot of clients, they were saying, what about the group activity? We can't run that virtually. And, again, it was some tweaks to how the assessment was designed, the size of candidate groups. So making sure, that there are probably 4 to 6 candidates per group for a group activity, to make sure that they can all contribute in a virtual sense. And then in terms of the behaviours, as I say, just some tweaks. But the key thing really was, how do we get materials to candidates without emailing all of our assessment content? I have had a few calls lately from clients who've said, oh, we just use Zoom or Teams, we didn't have an assessment platform. And we've just realized that we've now emailed all of our assessment content and it's basically out in the world and we think we're going to have to redesign it.
Oh, no.
Yeah, exactly. So it was more around, I think, security of delivering candidate materials and also security of data collation as well from assessors.
Yeah, interesting. I mean, whilst this whole thing's been going on, I found a piece of tech that freaked my team out, and I can understand why. But it was an extension to Zoom, and I was just looking for the name, but I can't find it for the moment. But it was this little heat map that sat in a Zoom meeting and showed me who had been basically who'd been speaking the most or the least during the session. And it was really interesting to kind of hold a team meeting with 5 or 6 people and watch as the heat map moved, and by the end of the meeting somebody had dominated like 60-70% of the talk time in some cases.
Yeah.
I think tools like that we're going to see more and more of as we shift to virtual. I found it really useful, that particular tool, in sales meetings, because as soon as it goes to kind of more than about 60% me talking, it's like, shut up, James. This is not going well for you. Start listening.
Yeah. So you've got some self-monitoring tools in place, which is good. And I mean, linking that to, the candidate experience, because there's these different technologies coming into play, you want to make sure that all candidates have a level playing field. So in terms of preparing candidates, I think, if there's technology available like that on any platform that you're using, putting that in your comms to candidates and saying, look, there is this facility that, can sort of heat map who's talking and when, please download it and use it, just so that, they're all on an equal playing field and it's not just one candidate who has that.
Yeah. Did you want to fix it?
I will do, yes. Can you see here your graduate assessment journey?
Yep.
Perfect. Yeah. All right. So I mentioned in terms of the candidate experience. So basically what we've built here is a branded platform for the company Avos with background imagery, which can be an organization's own images. And then we've got different tiles or hotspots of content on here. So for a candidate, receiving a welcome message, seeing who's going to be there on the day, you know, who are the facilitators that might be running a session, tips to prepare. So really, I think, you know, a big theme has been actually over communicating with candidates, which has been really, really important. In terms of the assessment content, we can deliver materials to the candidate. So for a presentation exercise, they can read instructions. They can also see some interactive materials that you might be using. So for example, an email, which may be part of your assessment exercise. Some numerical data, if that's part of the exercise as well. Social media extracts. So it's all about creating engaging content to deliver to candidates. Within the platform as well, we can get candidates to upload a response or enter responses to a written exercise directly into the platform. Now, so you'll see here where a candidate can type their response. The key thing in the delivery of this is basically being, I mentioned around the security of materials, making sure that we've got time locks on activities. So you'll see here, we've got this activity scheduled from the 24th to the 25th of November. Quite a long activity, this one that I scheduled. But basically having these tiles so that they can only be opened during a specific window. So if you're starting an exercise at 10 a.m., that's when for every candidate, that tile will become active at 10 a.m. We found as well that, providing a concierge service and breakout rooms for candidates has also been really important. So making sure, that there's a virtual room, a virtual breakout room that they can go to, and providing those links within the system. Yeah. On the assessor side of things, I mentioned that, training's been quite key. So using the platform to host video training content, images and materials around how to assess and how to assess fairly. And then within this same platform, being able to meet with candidates via virtual room links and to assess those candidates as well. So I guess it's, a system for managing distribution of information, managing schedules and distribution of those schedules to make sure that everyone's in the right place at the right time. So saving a lot of emails going out with many, many attachments to various assessors and candidates.
Yeah, that's great. I think we might have a question from Jackie, if that's right. Hi, Jackie. Jackie? Maybe not. Sorry.
All good. Give me a shout if that question does come up. So just whilst we're looking for those questions, possibly just a final point to cover is around the assessors recording their scores in the platform for candidates. So making sure that we've got competencies, so critical thinking here, which is measured in this exercise, negative and positive indicators, and then a scale for assessors to score. Now, the beauty here is that once that data is in the platform as a facilitator, that goes directly into your dashboard. So you're not having to call assessors to get copies of notes, to get them to take photos of hand scribbled notes and send them across to you. So we found that with clients, they can move to their wash-up session. I think that's actually quite an English term that I have, but essentially that data integration and discussion for decision making immediately at the end of the assessment centre without a delay. So no data entry or manual data entry required.
What sort of challenge you had, if any, with students who were perhaps preparing themselves for that physical assessment centre experience, who've kind of had to go and do it virtually? You know, what's the most common question that students are kind of asking you as the vendor?
Yeah, so students have actually responded quite easily to and adapted quite quickly to the situation and the technology. I would say that it's really critical to make sure that, you know, there's space and time available for candidates to do technology checks prior to the event. And that there's an emergency contact number should they drop out. You know, we did, of course, have a couple of instances where candidates lost internet connection. So making sure, you know, that your schedule allows for that, you are allowing that bit more time for the unexpected to occur. Assessors have also responded well. I'd say that they've probably been more hesitant at the start, but then really, you know, come on board as the assessment centre was running, seeing, you know, that it can work and how easy it can be.
Yeah, no, that's definitely what we've had from kind of other stakeholders. Students have kind of adapted kind of a lot faster than us this year in a lot of cases. And one client was sharing, she was conducting video interviews across Zoom, and the Zoom had failed. She said, "It suddenly occurred to me that we still have the telephone, and I conducted most of the interview on the telephone." And it was kind of, we've forgotten about the telephone in 2020.
Yeah, absolutely right. Yeah, and I think interestingly now, James, you know, we're hearing a lot from clients who run virtual assessment centres, and the overwhelming response is, why haven't we always done this virtually? Yeah. So we've got a large portion of clients who they won't go back. You know, even when we can run large events and meet in person, they're saying that, you know, virtually the efficiencies that they get from that process. Toll Group, as an example, had a 35% cost saving running virtual as opposed to face-to-face. So it's a huge cost saving, huge time save. It's still a really good experience for everyone. And now with that cash, organizations can start to say, all right, so maybe I run an in-person onboarding event. So for those candidates who are successful, let's get them in, you know, whilst they're waiting for their program to start, as a way to engage with them.
Yeah, no, I think as we've started going back to some kind of normal in Sydney, I've realised how much of my day gets eaten by moving from one meeting to the other. And I kid myself that answering emails on the fly is a productive way to spend half an hour, but it's really not. I think, yeah, there's going to be a lot of us, you know, not just in an assessment or interview scenario, who are electing to stay virtual.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I think, you know, this year has really made us shift very quickly how we're doing things. Another theme that we're seeing is, you know, around clients saying, actually, why do we have this one program that we run where we get, you know, 100, 200 or 50 graduates, however it might be, starting on the same day? That's actually not very good for the organization. James, I think we were also having this conversation last week. So therefore, if we're going to stagger that, how do we move to more of a rolling recruitment process as well, rather than this batch recruitment that we've done for so long?
That traditional schedule of events will be challenged a lot
Yes.
over the next couple of years.
Yeah.
As we kind of adapt and do things when we need it, rather than when who is says that we should be doing something.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely.
I'm conscious it's 1 o'clock. Do we have any more questions for Abi or Heidi, who I believe is still on the line as well?
I'm still here.
Awesome. Bring you back in for the end. Thank you so much, Abi, for those insights today. If anybody would like Abi's contact details, we can certainly facilitate that. Same goes for Heidi. Thank you all for coming along. In case you haven't realized, it is Movember. My face will change for our drag bingo and trivia session, which is the last industry insight session for the year. We're running that one as a Zoom meeting on the 16th of December, hosted by Timberlina, a Newcastle-based drag queen who saw her livelihood significantly challenged and pivoted from doing pubs and clubs in the Newcastle area to doing corporates on Zoom. So really looking forward to having Timberlina host on the 16th of December. And if you aren't already on that meeting invite, do drop me an email and I'll make sure that you get an invitation. My Movember link is in the chat box, a shameless request for a charitable donation if you see fit. Thanks again, Heidi and Abi, and we will see you all again very soon. Bye for now.
No worries. Thanks for having me. Bye all. Cheers.
Bye.